This is your Kick-Ass Life podcast, episode number 215.
And here's your host, the girl who serves it up straight with a side of crazy, Andrea Owen.
Ass kickers, welcome to another episode of the Daily Diaries. We've rounded a corner and we are in the last week of these. Thank you so much for staying with me. If you are just joining me, these started on episode 200 a few weeks ago, so you should probably start from there to have these make more sense. I have a story for you today. I mentioned this, I believe it was in the first week, where it was kind of like a side note, and I said, hey, and then this other thing happened, and it was, I had mentioned about going back home, and there was a lot of emotion when I do travel back to my hometown, and then I had mentioned that I had a friend that in the beginning of my book, I wrote briefly about this, and this friend and I were very, very close. We were best friends. And then my life fell apart. So she was my best friend during that whole time. And we just really weathered a storm together. Her mom also got really sick during that time. And we went through some tough times together. And then she exited the friendship. And then we rekindled. And then she kind of ghosted me, basically, is what happened. And I wrote about that in the book and how it was really hard for me, and I put myself out there. I was really vulnerable. I apologized to her about everything, and it didn't go as I had hoped it would. So that was the lesson in the book, talking about how to deal with that when you put yourself out there. In this case, having a hard conversation. I was making amends with someone, and I was proud of how I showed up, and it still didn't go as I had really hoped that it would. And then, anyway, so fast forward, I wrote my book in 2016. And then in October of 2017, I was actually in Huntington Beach hosting a retreat. And I got an email from her out of the blue. And I was like, wait, what? Wait a minute. And I'm not going to lie, it was hard on me. So I'm going to tell you the story a little bit more about that. But before I do, a quick reminder that today, Monday, February 26th, if you are listening to this, obviously on the day that it comes out, which I know many of you do, today is the last day to sign up for Raise Hell, which is my 4-month program that I cannot wait to get started. The women that have signed up for this program, I have made many phone calls to them, welcoming them to the program. And I am pumped. I am so excited to get started on this 4-month journey with them. We are going over things like boundaries and hard conversations, tolerations. What are you tolerating in your life? What do you need to let go of? What do you need to say yes to? What do you need to be open to receiving? And all of that info is over at yourkickasslife.com/raise-hell. We start tomorrow. And just one quick thing, there's no risk with this. I offer a 30-day money-back guarantee. So if you do the first 2 modules with us and you show up and do the work and you just realize that it's not for you, then you can have your money back. I don't ever want to make people feel like they're being held prisoner and that it's just not a right fit energetically or whatever. So head on over to that page and see if it's great for you. And if it is, I'm ecstatic to have you. Welcome, welcome, welcome. yourkickasslife.com/raise-hell. And I will see you over there. Okay, so I'm going to start by kind of telling you a quick timeline of events so the story makes a little bit more sense to you. So in 2007, my friend told me she needed a break from me. And her mom was ill and I had a lot of drama. And she was obviously, it was great that she was taking care of herself and I had to honor that, but it was still devastating for me. And then in 2008 is when I got my life back on track. Her mother was well again and we were friends again. And at the time we were still living in the same city. And then in 2011 is when my husband and I moved, and with our children, obviously. And that friendship kind of organically, we just lost touch. And that's sometimes what happens when you move away. And I had also gotten sober right when we moved in 2011. And I was really had thrown myself into recovery and just my own personal development in general. And then in 2012, I wrote her a letter. I wrote her a 3-page letter making amends to her for what I had remembered and known that I had done wrong in our friendship. I owned up to some of the things. Again, it was only the things that I knew that I had done. And I knew I wasn't the best friend that I could have been. And I also told her how much I missed her and that I would love to have her friendship again. So she emailed me back, or no, she emailed me in response to that handwritten letter that I had mailed her. And she acknowledged my letter and accepted my apology. And she asked if we could catch up via email first. And because I think in that letter I had mentioned that we were coming out, because at that time when we moved, we were going out every summer back home to visit family and friends. And I had let her know, we're gonna be coming out in a few months if you want to meet up. And so she said, you know what, let's just try to catch up via email first. She was basically saying like, let's turtle step our way back into this friendship, please. And so she's told me a little bit about what was going on in her life. And then I replied right away and did the same. And then nothing. I followed up even and was like, hi, did you get my last email? Did it fall into the black abyss of cyberspace? Are you ignoring me? And still nothing. And I was devastated. That's what I wrote about just a few paragraphs in the beginning of my book when I told you this story. And I said, I didn't ever know what happened. And I agonized over what I said in that last email, thinking I had said something wrong. Did I share too much? But this woman was my best friend for a long time. Like, we were at that stage in our relationship where, you could share the hard stuff. I didn't throw everything out there. It wasn't like a 17-mile long email. But again, I agonized over what I had said, what did I do, and really started to beat myself up over it. So I had to do a lot of work on letting that all go. And it was a good life lesson for me, realizing the stories I was making up about myself, forgiving myself for how I acted in the past, and really just paying attention to what was happening throughout that whole episode of not getting a response back from her. So fast forward October 2017, I never ever check my other messages on Facebook. Do you guys check those? It's usually creepy marriage proposals or spam emails, but for some reason, I felt compelled to check. And lo and behold, she had only emailed me like 3 or 4 days before that. There's a message from her. And so we have like 5 or 6 mutual friends on Facebook, but she and I were not Facebook friends. And in this email, she said hello and that she's been thinking of me. It was really sweet and just her, She asked how I was, and she said she hoped me and the kids and Jason were well. And I was like, and the even more painful thing, like PS, the even more painful thing about this whole thing is because we have mutual friends, you know how that happens. They take pictures at events and parties and things like that. And like, there she is with her family. And I introduced her to her husband, years and years ago. He was a friend of my ex-husband, and they fell in love and got married and had 2 kids. And we had children 2 months apart from each other. So her son is 2 months older than my son, and her daughter is 2 months older than my daughter. So I'm essentially like watching her children grow up, every, 6 to 12 months, I would see pictures on Facebook of them growing up on Facebook, and I just was like, it just was so painful to know that she's out there like living her life, but know that we are no longer friends and never know kind of what happened. And so when I got that email, I felt like someone had kind of punched me in the face. It was so weird. I've never experienced anything like it with a friendship, because it felt like a long lost boyfriend whom I was in love with a long time ago and that had dumped me, and then was circling back with a casual, hey, how are ya? I had done all this work to forgive myself, to forgive her, to let go. And there she was again. I felt like I was digging up a dead body. And I replied a couple of days later. I waited because it was so interesting too, y'all, because I'm the type of person, and this is something else I've really had to work on, is the sort of like balance around, and this is emotional boundaries is what it is, because I have realized what I had always done. I had gone all in with somebody. If you show me a little bit of your heart, like I'm going to show you all mine. And I was starting to realize like this was sort of getting me in trouble. And then what I realized I was doing, I was either all in completely or all out. There was no in between for me. And so when I got her email, like immediately, like my hands hit the keyboard and I was like, I wanted to type like, oh my God, I miss you so much. Where are you? Like just swallow this person whole. And I think that's my old love addiction behavior that was sort of like, oh, let's take a bite out of this. So I had to really check myself. It was just really interesting to watch. So I sat on it for a couple of days and I wrote her back and said, hi, glad to hear from you. And I told her I would be in San Diego in January. And did she want to meet up? Because that's when I was going to be out there for my book tour. And I tried my best to not hold on to any outcomes that I wanted. Because for all I know, she could have just wanted to say hi. Like just casually, hey, I saw your picture pop up in, our mutual friend's thing and just wanted to say hi. She could have come back and been like, no, I'm not really that interested. I just wanted to say hi and how you were doing. And so I had to really understand that could happen and that would be really painful for me. But I also knew that I couldn't have this kind of casual, blasé relationship, like pop into my life whenever you want and say hi. It felt like trying to be friends with an ex-boyfriend. I don't know about y'all, but I have never been good at that. Nope. It takes up too much space and energy in my heart. So that's a boundary that I've had to make. Anyway, so that's kind of the things I was thinking of. So we made plans to have lunch. And I think also, when I walked away from that Facebook conversation and I was really thinking about it, and I think that part of why the friendship that she and I had held so much weight and emotion was because she was there when the ship went down for me, when everything fell apart. And in the the short email exchange that we had back in 2011, one of the things that she said was, I watched you weather so much then. My heart broke for you over and over again. And I realized that for her to have to be my person then, and neither of us really had the tools to deal with that kind of a magnitude of what was going on in both of our lives. It was probably triggering for her to talk to me again, as it was for me too. And neither of us really knew how to weather the whole thing. And so it really made me realize when she said that to me, and I was like, wow, she did really care and love me. And it must have been really hard for her. I never stopped to think how hard it must have been for her to watch me go through that, someone that you care about so much. So anyway, I knew going into this meeting with her, I was walking into discomfort and comfort at the same time. She was someone who knew me then, someone who genuinely loved me and had been there through her own growth over the last decade as well, even though I haven't been a part of her life since, really like 2010. And she was also someone who was willing to hear everything I had to say and was willing to say all the hard things that she felt too. So we met at a restaurant and it was like a 3-hour lunch. And I think it was incredibly healing for both of us. What had happened too is that during the time that we weren't speaking, this was about a year before my dad died, she lost her mother. And it was not easy for me to find out about that on Facebook. Again, just one of our mutual friends had mentioned it, and I was like, holy shit. Her mom was an incredible human being, and I didn't even know that she was sick again. Last I knew that she was well, and I found out that she died. And so, my friend got to tell me her story of her mom's passing, and then I told her the story of losing my dad, and we talked about motherhood and marriage and laughed about things we hadn't thought about or talked about in 10 years. I told her how hard it was for me to get her email last October, and that I was afraid to let her back in. And she apologized, and she told me that in 2011, when she never replied to my email, it was because, she got my email sort of telling her what was going on in my life. And it was nothing, enormous. It was just like regular life stuff. But when she got it, she wasn't sure she was ready to let me back in, and that she didn't have the words to talk to me about it. So she backed away quietly. And I understood that. I get that. I totally get that. And one of the things too that she told me that was really, really hard for me to hear, but I think is so important in my own work and is so important in friendships in general, is she told me, she said, and I also didn't know how to tell you that sometimes you were mean to me. And again, I felt like she had punched me, partly because she's right. And I said, I'm not at all trying to make excuses, but because, again, she's true story. I own that. And I told her, looking back on it, like I didn't understand this at the time. I couldn't make sense of it. But the reason that I was because I was so angry. I was so angry at my circumstances of where I was in. I was unhappy in my relationship and had been for years, and so desperately wanted it to change, but it wasn't changing, and it had been a long time. And I took it out on the people that I loved the most. The people that I trusted would never leave me. Isn't that what we do? We tend to take out our emotions. It's called offloading hurt. And it's something I work on with my clients who do the Rising Strong process with me. And we all do this to some extent. And I did it to her. And it was because, like she had mentioned, didn't have the words to put around what was actually happening. And true for me is that I didn't have the courage to leave the relationship I was in to go and really find true happiness. I didn't have the courage to own the responsibility that I had to myself and to really truly look at what I was tolerating in my life. I knew from a surface level that I was tolerating a lot of bullshit, but I didn't understand the magnitude of it. I felt so stuck, and I really wasn't. I just chose to be stuck, and I chose to take it out on the people who I loved the most. And I think her exiting that friendship was probably the best thing for both of us. And the way she described it is she put her hands together and then she kind of separated them and put them back together. And she said, she's like, it feels to me that we needed to be together and come apart to grow as we are individually as women so that we can come back together and be better for each other. And it just was so interesting how, realizing how our friendships can hold as much emotion and break our hearts, just like our romantic relationships can be. And it's imperative that we honor that, whether the person circles back like my friend did or they didn't. And I know that our friendship can never be like it was, when we really, we had some really great times before we had kids, just so many great times, and then watched each other have babies and go through that stage together. And we live on opposite coasts now. So I know that that's difficult it's hard enough to maintain friendships locally, but to maintain friendships from that far away is tricky. And we talked about that, but we are willing to catch up and And when I go out to San Diego, I will always do my best to try to see her. And I don't know. I just feel there's something about still being close and honoring the people who were with you through some really hard times and the people that you have that kind of history with that know that deep part of you. I just think it's something really special. And I never would have thought it would turn out how it did. I really, truly did not ever think it would turn around and that she would circle back and do that. But I guess when you surrender, like I always try to do, the universe hands you exactly what you need. So that's it. And I hope that you can honor the feelings that you have within you, within your friendships, and join me tomorrow as I'm going to be telling you a story about my daughter and some baby bunnies. So stay tuned for that. And until next time, ass kickers, I will see you out in cyberspace. Bye-bye.